Hello and welcome to Matcha Mornings, part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network. I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith, and I'm excited to dive deep on topics around holistic health, the power of food, hormone health, how the practices of yoga can impact our health and well-being, and much more. So grab your cup of tea, settle in, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Matcha Mornings podcast. I'm so excited that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am very excited to be joined by Michelle Coleman. Michelle is somebody that I actually met through an old colleague that I was working with, and her and I immediately hit it off on our passion for yoga, spirituality, mental health, healthy living, and her and I had a ton of matcha dates and coffee dates and lunch dates when we were both living in Charleston, South Carolina. And this is a conversation that Michelle and I have had offline, and I'm so excited to get to share this online. And on this episode of the show, Michelle shares her background and her past with health and wellness, how she got introduced to the idea of healthy living. And then as she evolved with it, she started discovering more resources that were super helpful for her and what she was suffering with. And she discovered the medical medium. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the medical medium, it's Anthony William, and he's the dude behind the lemon juice and the celery juice and all these fads that have kind of really become a big hit in the world over the last couple of years. And I actually learned about the medical medium through Michelle. She told me about him a number of years ago. I immediately went home and got a sample of a book on my Kindle. I loved it, purchased it. Since then, I've purchased a couple of different books, and I've found everything that I've learned from him and his protocols to be super, super interesting. Now, I have never followed the detoxes or the meal plans fully, and so I really wanted to have Michelle on to talk about the medical medium protocol, what it's been like for her, what healing she's experienced, how to get started with it, and so much more. So that's very much what we're going to dive in today, and I hope that you guys enjoy this episode of the show. Welcome to the podcast today, Michelle. I'm really excited to have you here with me today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amanda. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I am so excited for this conversation. You and I have talked a little bit about, your health journey and stuff off the podcast, and I'm super stoked to hear more about it on the podcast. And so my first question for you is, can you tell me a little bit about where your journey with health started and a little bit about your background with that?
Sure. So I think that actually that's one of the harder questions to really answer. But if I'm looking back, I was a really healthy child, but then in middle school, I sort of fell into that negative self-image and body issues, and kind of through middle school and high school struggled with some of that. But I often think that those struggles is where a lot of us start. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, truly where it started for me, unfortunately, is that I really struggled with feeling like I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to be seen as, skinny and pretty and popular, like a lot of girls. And I kind of took a negative path to get that way. And I think I really wanted the attention as well. And when I got that attention, I realized I didn't actually really want it. And I sort of felt embarrassed about wanting the attention in the first place. And so I struggled with that mostly in middle school and high school, and I sort of was able to step away from it, from like the anorexic tendencies and stuff like that. But into college, you're meeting all these new people and you want to make a good first impression. And again, that whole social pressure to fit in. And so I was still kind of dabbling with different things, and I came across the Master Cleanse, and I was trying that on and off. And I think with a lot of health journeys, what happens is we find something new and we try it, and then, maybe it works for a little bit, maybe we become unfazed with it, and then it's kind of like um, we maybe move on from it, or we take a break, we go back to our unhealthy eating habits. And I think like in college, a friend actually recommended the book Skinny Bitch. Have you read that one?
So I haven't read it, but I have heard of it and I've had friends who've had it. So I've like looked through it and stuff.
Okay. Yeah. So my friend gave me Skinny Bitch, and I was just fascinated with the information. It's kind of the pre documentaries with all the, What the Health and Cowspiracy. It was kind of like the precursor almost to all of those. And I was just fascinated by the information, and I was empowered by it. And so that was in college when I decided to become vegetarian. And so that was like really my first big step into the health scene. And just, again, realizing at some point that I was a vegetarian, but that didn't necessarily mean I was eating my fruits and vegetables, that I was still eating things like chips and cheese or nachos and mac and cheese and quesadillas and just all these terrible things. And so, it kind of continues down this slow path. And I really think that my true health journey started with the medical medium. And I think that because all those other things that I was doing was because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be seen as pretty or as skinny, whatever. And I really think that the true health journey for me starts where I decided it's not about what other people think. It's about how I feel in my body. And that's the most important thing,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to that too. And I actually just had a conversation with a friend for this podcast as well before this. And we talked, her journey was really similar, and my journey has a lot of similar things to yours as well, where, we get introduced to these like quote unquote health things that can kind of lead us in these directions that are maybe not so healthy if you're like being restrictive and that sort of thing. But then we can turn a corner and we can find stuff that actually helps us get to a place of recognizing that health can be a lot more about how you feel in your body as opposed to how you look. And I mean, I think it's really tough for everyone because there's so many societal things, but particularly for women, like we're consistently have, images like thrown at us. Like you go shopping for groceries and there's magazines with women in bikinis that look a certain way. And I think for most people, it's hard not to be like, I don't look at that. I don't look like that. Therefore, there must be something wrong with me, which I think is, then beside that is some diet magazine where it's like, if you eat this, you'll look like this. And we just get all this messaging constantly. And I love, healthy living and stuff like that. But I also feel like it teeters really closely on these really unhealthy paths, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so I kind of mentioned I dabbled in different things. And, for example, I mentioned the master cleanse. And when I think about it, would I recommend that for someone? I'm not sure that I would anymore. But at the time when I did that, it did purge me of a lot of my like food addiction. So like after I started doing that, like I did it a couple of times, and I really stopped eating a lot of like sugary sweets, like chocolate, like M&M's, Snickers, like all those things. Mm-hmm. So I think that you can still find like good elements of those things, but it is a very slippery slope where you just kind of need to be careful and really mindful about what you're doing. And I think you're right. As women, it is really difficult for us.
Yeah, absolutely. There's like so many messages that we get all the time. And it seems like that's starting to shift a little bit, which is really great, but it's going to take time for sure.
Definitely. Yeah.
And you mentioned your health journey kind of starting like, actually starting when you discovered the medical medium or Anthony Williams' work. And I'm curious, like how did you get introduced to the medical medium stuff?
Yeah, So one cold winter night in California, all my good stories start that way.
I love it.
I have a meditation teacher in California, and she invited me over for a dinner one night, and she had made us this chili baked potato, and I couldn't stop talking about it. I was like, this thing is so good. And she was telling me how she made it, and she's like, oh yeah, it's really actually quite easy. And she eventually, because I asked so many questions, she eventually brought out this book, Life Changing Foods. And the setup of the book is just so beautiful. It's almost like it's like a cookbook a little bit, but Anthony William talks about the different foods, and for example, apples. If you have these problems, you should be eating apples. If you want to cure these things, eat apples. Then he talks about what's inside of apples, and it's really this really in-depth information about, I guess, like singular foods. So he takes like an apple and he breaks it down for like a page or two, telling you all the amazing benefits of it. And so yeah, I fell in love with that book right away, and I went out and I bought it like the next day off of Amazon, and I started reading it and trying the recipes. And yeah, that's really how I found out about it, was my meditation teacher.
Yeah. And did you say chili baked potato?
Yeah.
That sounds so good.
Oh yeah, it was so good.
As you said that, I feel like my stomach was like, chili baked potato. You're selling me on this book already.
It's honestly my favorite book of his. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know, because I know you've got a couple of them at least, if not all of them. And was he like as popular as he is now? Like, was he like I know he was like the medical medium at this point, but was he like the medical medium?
No, he was not. I mean, he was, had the title. His first book is actually called The Medical Medium. But when I went to his website, what gave me the credibility, or gave him the credibility for me, was that he had a list of celebrities at the bottom that he had helped heal. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting that he's helped celebrities. And so to some extent he had done work with celebrities, but it was not as big as he was. He hadn't been on the Kardashians or anything like that. He hadn't really made any public appearances that I knew of. And I don't even think like Instagram and YouTube were that big at that time either. So there wasn't really a lot of information except for in the books.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And so did you start like implementing different things from his like protocols and stuff like right away?
Yeah. So the thing that I love about him is that you can really start anywhere. So one of the things that I started with was celery juice was his main thing. And at the time I was just kind of a little too busy to actually be juicing. And I decided, well, I can cut up some celery sticks and eat them on my way to work. So every morning I would pack a little baggie of celery sticks and just munch on them on my way to work. So that was like the first thing I think that I implemented. But then it was just going back to the apples, just incorporating stuff like that. Like, okay, I can add an apple into my day. Especially like I was dealing with depression also. And that's one of the things that apples helps with. So I was like, oh yeah, I actually enjoy apple, and it's easy to pack. So why not add stuff like that? And you can just add little things at a time.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And so if somebody I'm sure people are like, oh, celery juice, is this the dude behind the celery juice? Because it's kind of like blown up over the last year. I feel like the prices of celery have just skyrocketed in the last year, which is crazy. Good for celery producers, I guess. But for anyone who's not familiar with Anthony William and the medical medium, can you just walk us through like a little bit about like what sort of his philosophies are, and like what exactly his sort of like beliefs and I guess like philosophies around food are?
Oh, sure. I'll do my best. That's a pretty big question. But I think his overall philosophy is really to take it back to fruits and vegetables and herbs. That's where most of the nutrients come from. And, even something like I mentioned when I was younger, I struggled with not eating versus like eating junk food and all this, going back and forth between two very unhealthy habits. And one of the things I had learned was that, but this was back in high school, that celery was nothing more than water. And it really was. That was the one that I remember reading was celery. And it was like, oh yeah, these are the negative calorie foods. And celery was top of that list. So now I'm reading his books and celery has so many powerful properties. And so his thing is sort of taking the fruits and vegetables that we often just think, oh, celery is just water, and actually telling us why they're so important for our health. So do you know the story behind his gift?
I know like a little bit of it, but if you want to share, that would be awesome.
Okay. So when Anthony William was 4, he was sitting at the dinner table with his family, and he went up to his grandma and, touched her shoulder and was like, "Grandma has lung cancer." And now his grandma was symptom-free. There was no signs of this. But as you can imagine, having a 4-year-old at the dinner table say, "Grandma has lung cancer," is kind of strange. So they thought that they decided to get it checked out. And they went to the doctor, and sure enough, she did have lung cancer. And so that's sort of where his story begins. He hears spirit. This is the spirit of compassion, of love. And spirit is telling him what's wrong with people. And so he has this gift to be able to read people, that therefore the medical medium. He has no schooling. So it's all based on this gift that he has. And spirit will tell him what's wrong with the person and also what supplements and vitamins and foods they can add to their life to cure those ailments, those illnesses and diseases.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually heard him on, I don't know if you listen to like Rachel Brathen or Yoga Girls podcast, but she had him on as a guest, which is super, super cool. And he was talking a little bit about that. And I didn't know that aspect of it. Like I first heard of medical medium through you actually. And then I bought Liver Rescue. And that's when I first heard about like the celery juice, started following him on Instagram, and I didn't know much of his background. And he told a little bit of that story on that podcast episode. And I was like, whoa, like, I mean, I'm like have a spiritual practice, but I was like, that's not my journey in life. So I'm like, that's so hard to imagine having that experience and then like living with that all the time. But it's also really amazing that he's been able to heal so many people through this gift.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I didn't know that you learned about him through me, but yeah, I think it is a really powerful gift. And it's actually something I'm sure she said in her podcast, but it's something that he can't turn off. Mm-hmm. So he tends not to go into crowded areas and things like that, because the spirit's just always telling him what's wrong with people, because spirit wants him to help other people, to heal people, to really heal the world. And there's so much misinformation out there and so many diets you can follow. As I said, I've tried different things, and I really don't think I really started to see results when I started doing the different medical medium protocols. So
yeah. And when you say results, can you kind of walk through like what that's been like for you as you've done that?
Sure. So I think that, as I kind of mentioned, I started implementing small things, but I wanted to see results faster, as we all do. Mm-hmm. And so I really started to get into the celery juice. And this was before the celery juice was a huge thing. And I know that because I used to be able to find celery really easily in the grocery stores. And at some point, I could not find celery. Like I would go to like 3 different stores and it was just not there. So, and that was because everybody was hearing about it and trying it, which is great. It is great. It's for me. But so I actually started to do the celery juice. And the first thing I honestly noticed was that I stopped having like this nauseous feeling throughout the day. And I'm pretty sure that nauseous feeling was just from eating really terrible foods and not really paying attention, not being in tune with my body. And I kind of knew it was there, obviously, because I'm going around feeling nauseous all day, but I was a preschool teacher at the time. And so I didn't really have time to think about, oh, I feel nauseous right now. You just kind of go through your day. Mm-hmm. But when I started doing the celery juice and noticing, I was like, wow, this is great. Like, I don't feel nauseous anymore. And of course, that's an empowering feeling. So I wanted to do more, to add more things. And so just slowly adding things like more water, especially adding like lemon or lime to my water, because it provides more benefits that way. Or adding smoothies, adding leafy greens to whatever I was eating, all those kind of things. And my main thing was that I've struggled with acne since I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. And I still do struggle with it because, on your journey, there's usually a couple setbacks. And so I still go out for pizza every once in a while or eat something I shouldn't, eat a piece of cake at a party. And so kind of have the setbacks, but then, you are moving forward still because the majority of my diet is eating healthier or implementing healthier foods. So I actually have seen, whereas my acne used to be very sporadic and just honestly, it felt like it happened all the time. There's now more of like, okay, it comes for a week, and then I kind of have some scarring for maybe another week. And then I have 2 weeks where it feels like I have really clear skin, which is a huge sign of progress for me.
Yeah. A
lot of our issues are internal, so it's kind of hard to diagnose everything, but I definitely think that there has been healing within my body. So
yeah, I mean, it's amazing to hear about, having really good results with your acne. And then also, this is one of the things about the human experience that's always kind of frustrated me because, having challenges with hormones and my physical body too is like, and I've had like really, really challenging digestion like most of my life. And it's like, I just feel like this frustration of being in, like, you can't leave your body, right? Like, you physically are like, you're kind of stuck in it. And so you just do your best to have like a really great experience in it. But sometimes I'm just like, hey, stomach, like, could we like communicate a little better? Because like, I'm ready to listen. I know in the past I haven't, but I'm like, I'm here and I'm ready. So if you could just like, let me know what you need, that would be great.
Yeah, it's so true. It'd be so great if we could sometimes leave our bodies.
Yeah, just have a little break from them just for a minute or two. But it is like, it's like, oh, skin, like, what do you need? And I think that it can be really hard because you're like, especially as a woman, I mean, we go through like our, 28 to 35 day cycle as well. And our hormones are like doing all sorts of crazy things. And it's hard to like keep up with it all and understand like, okay, what do you need now? And I feel like, I don't know, when I was listening to that podcast episode with Rachel and Anthony, she was like, oh, so can you like hear what's going on with me now? And he's like, yeah, like it doesn't stop. And then he told her, and I was like, man, like I would love for him to do that to me so that I could just like know, because it does feel frustrating when you can't hear what your own body's trying to tell you.
Yes, absolutely. And if you ever get him to do a reading, call me up. I would love to have a reading by the medical medium as well.
Yeah, and vice versa.
Yes, for sure. It's just so, like you're saying, it's so frustrating. And because the chances are we won't get that medical medium reading. But I think that's why podcasts like this and YouTube videos and just talking to friends and other people is so important, because I have a couple instances in my life where somebody kind of shared some information with me, and I was like, oh. So for example, I was hostessing in college, and this other girl who was hostessing with me was like talking about, her PMS symptoms. And I was like, oh, so you probably want some chocolate right now. And she was like, actually, I never want chocolate. She's like, I don't know. She's like, I guess I'm just weird. But she's like, my body never craves that. I kid you not. The next time I had PMS, I was like, I actually am not craving chocolate, but it's something that I've heard people say, a societal message that I just kind of assume like, oh yeah, every girl wants chocolate, around that time of month. And when we talk to each other and listen to other people's experience, it sort of allows us to be more mindful about our own bodies and our own experience. I had the same thing happen with dairy when somebody said that dairy upset their stomach. I went to like a meditation session after I had just like eaten like cheese and crackers, I think. And my stomach was just like making so many noises. And I was like, I want this to stop. It was so embarrassing because it was so quiet. And then there's just my stomach, with all these noises. And so then I kind of pulled away from dairy. And again, my stomach felt so much better. So I think really talking to other people and finding out their experiences can be so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've had lots of different like aha moments with that too. I mean, even talking to you and hearing about, the medical medium protocol, I think I had similar experience where I went home and like got Liver Rescue on my Kindle and started reading it because I was like, oh, it seems like, you're somebody that I trust and you've had these great experiences with it. Like I want to dive in and see what this is all about. And I feel like it is really good to have those conversations. And I think it's really important that more conversations are being had like that because, kind of like we were saying, like our body gives us hints, like your stomach's rumbling and you can't make it stop, which is so annoying. I've also been in that situation having like IBS troubles most of my life. It's like I'm in Shavasana at a yoga class and my stomach's like, whoa, and I'm like, can you just not right now? It's like not the time to make these noises. Like I'll feed you whatever you need after this is over.
Like,
now it's not the time.
Any other time, please.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But it's like, I guess it's like, tuning into that type of thing and then recognizing like how we can make shifts from there. I guess our body does give us little signs, and then it's our responsibility to listen. Although I think it would be easier if we could just have conversations with, our stomach or our face or, whatever it is for sure.
And often because our bodies are working so hard to protect us from our own selves, really, when we're eating a bag of Doritos, the body knows better and it's trying to protect ourselves. And so it's doing all that it can to not have those symptoms. And so it's often like, okay, we finally get the symptoms. You're kind of trying to ignore them until you can't, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's like, okay, I can't ignore these symptoms. I'm in the hospital or I have acne. And it's like, okay, it's time to acknowledge them and figure out what can be done.
Yeah, absolutely. That was actually one of the things that I really found, like one of my biggest takeaways with reading Liver Rescue was just like learning about the liver. And he says like, this is an organ that we're not really taught much about. A lot of people don't really understand it, yet it's like our like cleaning house for our body. And I found that so fascinating as somebody who's interested in health and wellness and my physical body, with like movement and just understanding what the organs do. And I was like, how have I lived I guess I would have read it at like 29 probably. How have I lived 29 years of my life and never considered what my liver does for me every single day? And then it's so interesting how it's like, we go to sleep and we think we're resting our mind and our body, and our liver's like up there trying to clean up the Doritos and, all the coffee we drank and the cake we ate. And it's not to say that like eating those things is something we should never do, but it is a reminder that like our body is working hard to try and keep itself in, I guess, like, what's the word? Like homeostasis, like balance.
Yeah, definitely. I I remember reading, now I don't know if you read the book straight through, but I tend to kind of read bits and pieces.
That's what I did too.
Okay. Yeah. So when I was reading some of the liver rescue book, I remember thinking that as well, like, wow, the liver does so much. And I just had this like really kind of in awe, honestly, of like all the liver does. And just kind of, it was kind of funny because it's this thing that's been inside me all my life. And I just never had like respect for it. I kind of felt bad, honestly, like, oh, I'm really sorry, liver, that I've been messing with you for all these years. You poor thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I honestly had the same thing because the only thing I'd ever really knew about the liver was that it can be affected by alcohol, that it's like the one that processes alcohol. And I still do drink alcohol, although thankfully not as much as I drank in my early 20s. But like in college, like I drank quite a bit of alcohol. And I mean, my knowledge of the liver was like, oh, my liver is going to process this. And if I take Tylenol for a hangover, like that's going to be really hard on it. So I should probably take Advil instead.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what kind of information is that?
I mean, that's youthful thinking and hoping, like you hear that kind of stuff like, oh, just take the Advil to help with it. And it's like, okay, so it makes it feel like it's okay to do. And of course I did those things too. I drank too much alcohol in college but it's never too late to turn it around and to start healing the body. That's the great news, right?
Yeah, that was one of the other things that I found like just really amazing. It just made me like really respect my body a lot, my organs a lot, was reading about how like, I mean, Anthony William talks about that. Like, the liver is ready to forgive you for all those times that you didn't treat it nicely. Like it's in there, cells are regenerating, it's pumping out different stuff. And this is the same with microbiome too, is like within a couple of days and, weeks, months, you can really, really change like your internal health, which is such an amazing thing for me personally. And then for anyone who's listening, who's like, oh crap, like I'm totally screwed. You're not. It doesn't take that much before the body's like, okay, we're regenerating tissues and we're healing essentially.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Hey everyone, we're taking a quick break from the podcast to talk about Muse. Muse tracks your brain during meditation to give you real-time feedback on your meditation, guiding you into the zone and solving the major problem that most of us have when starting a meditation practice. Muse lets you know when you're doing it right. Your Muse headband basically acts like your personal assistant. While you meditate, Muse measures whether your mind is calm or active and translates that data into sounds. When you're calm, you'll hear peaceful sounds, and when your mind wanders, the sounds will intensify, guiding you back to a calm state. So if you're like me, where you have a really solid meditation practice and you love to do it every day or every couple of days, but sometimes you just find that you really can't get in the rhythm because your mind is so busy, Muse might be for you. The best part about this is that I have a 15% discount off just for listeners of Matcha Mornings. So head on over to bit.ly/Matcha Mornings Muse to get your discount. All right, back to the episode. And so you mentioned with some of the results that you got with doing the medical medium protocol, you said acne was a big one. Was there any other stuff that kind of came up for you in terms of like, feeling better once you started changing like the way you were eating?
I definitely feel like my mental state was affected as well. I think I started to kind of have more of a clear mind and less depression, less anxiety, which is also huge, if not more so than the other physical symptoms. To have that clarity and that like a more positive mentality without really even, and I do like to read I like to read self-help books. So there is that element for me, but even more so than that, it's just a certain cloud was lifted. So that was a really great feeling as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And are there any like particular foods that are attributed to helping with, depression or that type of thing?
Oh man, I think he has a lot in his books. Fruit is great for that because of the glucose, and a lot of people, tend to be like, oh, it's sugar, but we have to remember that not all sugar is the same, but a lot of the fruits, and a lot of them are the basic ones like apples and bananas, grapes, things like that, that can help depression. Even celery juice, can help the depression. So
That's amazing. It's like a reminder that, everything that we have here on the planet can be helpful in terms of like elevating our experience as a human, which is really cool.
yeah, it really is that we have all these tools. When you read his books, you realize that all these foods are tools. Grapes are a tool. Leafy greens are a tool. They're all medicine. So you can always use those things to heal your body, and it is really cool. They're accessible to us all,
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, like, I'm not big into, I guess, like diets, like just from a past of also, having some restrictive eating in my teens and my early 20s. I tend not to go that way.
Yeah.
Which makes me always like, I'm curious, obviously, like I hear about things and I'm curious and I want to learn. But then I'm also like, okay, I don't want to get in the mindset of becoming like addicted or obsessed with a certain type of like diet, I guess you could say. But one of the things that I find really interesting about everything that is like has to do with the medical medium is that it is like these foods that we're already shopping for and that a lot of us are already eating have these really specific properties for helping to heal, kind of like you said about like the apples. Like apples do all these really great things. And we hear, like growing up, or at least I did, like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. But we don't really know like what that is. Like we're just told fruits and veggies are good. You should eat your fruits and veggies. You should like eat apples. And it's this reminder that it like doesn't have to be, I guess, hard to shift into like the mode of healthy healing. Because I think that a lot of times it's like, oh, it's really expensive. It can be really hard. I don't have time to do all this meal prep. And with this, it seems like, okay, like lemon water is really simple. Celery juice, I guess, is a little bit more challenging, but I love your example of like just eating celery because you didn't have the time to make the juice. That's great. Eating an apple, that's so easy. It's one of the easiest snacks. And so I really like that about that.
Yeah. And with his kind of philosophy is that mindset of just honestly think of a fruit or vegetable that you like and add that into your daily routine, and you're already helping to heal your body. I don't think that there's a single fruit or vegetable that he dismisses. I think they all have healing properties. So if you're like, well, I don't like apples, I don't like bananas. Okay, well, there's something that you like. Is it avocados? Is it potatoes, onions, garlic? What do you like? Do you like water? Do you like lemon water, lime water? Like there's so many chances to help start turning your life around in that way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Is there anything on like the no list when it comes to medical medium protocol? Like, is there anything that he's like, okay, as humans, we like need to stop eating these things?
Yeah, so he does actually, and actually that reminds me that corn is one of the things on his list, and it's unfortunate. That was always my favorite vegetable, and I will still have some from time to time, but he does say that corn is not as healthy as it was because of the GMOs, the genetic modifying that's been going on with it, that it's really hard to find non-GMO corn. So that's one thing that he says to stay away from. But I think the main things would be things like eggs, dairy, wheat or gluten, and pork, I think, is on his list. So those are soy. Soy is another thing on his list.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that I kind of remember because those are some of the things that I've implemented into my own life. But
yeah, Do you know why the corn makes sense to me? Although I also feel the same way as you. I do love like corn on its own. Although if I'm being quite honest, I feel like corn, I like the processed forms of corn, which is just a reminder of how I really shouldn't be eating that anyways. Like I love tacos and
Oh
chips and
yeah.
guacamole and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And there's lots of alternatives popping up now with other types of flours, which is really great, like nut flours and stuff. But I'm just like, oh man, Mexican food's my favorite.
I
It's all
know.
corn.
I know, so true.
It's like corn tortilla with corn chips with probably grilled corn on the side.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know why eggs? Eggs, I'm curious about. Do you know why he says eggs should not be eaten? Like, is it because of how we produce them now, or is it something around actually eating like the egg?
So it's actually that a lot of us have the Epstein-Barr virus, and this his information again goes often surpasses the medical information because he has a spirit telling him what's actually going on, where science is still kind of guessing. Like science is still, legit, but they're still sort of guessing and experimenting and researching a lot of these things. And so one of the things with the Epstein-Barr virus is that there's so many different forms that he says that most of us have some form of that virus. And we keep that virus in there because viruses need to eat. And eggs and dairy and gluten are some of the things that they eat. And so if you have that virus in you and you're struggling with something, so like for me, I'm struggling with the acne, but every time I eat an egg, I'm feeding that virus. And viruses, when they eat, they also have to expel that waste. So then their waste is also floating in your body. So then it just kind of creates this compounded problem of getting rid of these things. So that's why he says not to eat the egg, because it's feeding the viruses inside of you.
Oh, that's so interesting. I don't know much about Epstein-Barr virus. Do you know like a little bit about what it is?
What I know about Epstein-Barr virus is that it causes all sorts of different problems. It's a basis for a lot of the mystery illnesses or so-called autoimmune diseases, things like acne. It's kind of the start of a lot of problems that people have.
Okay, interesting. I'm going to need to do some more research about this. I've heard kind of like from listening to him and reading and stuff a little bit about it, but I think I need to dive deeper into learning about that because eggs are definitely something I consume in my diet. The rest of the stuff, dairy's like only sometimes. Pork, I don't really eat.
Yeah.
I feel like eggs are definitely my major thing on that list.
Yeah. Eggs are, it's a huge society thing. I mean, so many people eat eggs. That's such a staple for actually really breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Totally.
And cooking, they bind things together. So yeah, that's a hard one for a lot of people to hear, is the eggs are no good. And, he never is pressuring people to do that thing. If you want to eat eggs, he's not going to, make you stop, but he's just giving people the information so that they can make the best informed decision for their own life.
Yeah, absolutely, which is awesome and makes me feel like it's more like a lifestyle as opposed to like a fad diet type thing.
Yeah, and that part is so important. I agree. Making it more of a lifestyle.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'm curious, like, if you're eating pretty, I guess, in line with like medical medium protocol, what does kind of like your day-to-day look like in terms of like what food you would consume?
Right now, I wake up and I do lemon water as the first thing. And that's just to kind of cleanse the liver and help it. So the liver has been picking up the trash all night. And so you need something that's going to take that trash out. And so lemon water is something that does that really well. And so I always start with lemon water. And when I do that, I also take several supplements, a probiotic, all that kind of good stuff. And then the next thing, I'll wait, 20 to 30 minutes, and then I'll drink my celery juice. And the reason I drink the celery juice is to raise those hydrochloric acid levels in your stomach, which are the good acids that help to break down the food. So critical on an empty stomach to take that celery juice, and it kind of sets your day off right, so that your food is going to be digested easier. Then I've kind of gone from switching it up from making breakfast either some sort of fruit like cantaloupe or watermelon, bananas, whatever you like. And then, or switching over to like a smoothie. So right now I'm doing the heavy detox or heavy metal detox smoothie. And that's to remove metals that are in your body that kind of cause things like depression and brain fog and things like that. So that's something I'm working on right now. So that's kind of my current morning routine. And then for lunch, doing some sort of salad. Those leafy greens are really important. And so I try to make sure I incorporate those. And just so everyone knows, it's not some sort of small side salad. It's not just doesn't have just like carrots and tomatoes and a little bit of lettuce in there. It's like you would look at it and think I'm about to serve a family, a family of four, a salad. And so I put all sorts of things in there, and it varies from day to day what's in that salad. But just putting as many vegetables, raw vegetables in there as I can. And then having snacks throughout the day is also really important to keep that blood sugar level at a balance, at the homeostasis, to keep your adrenals working well and all that. So I often will reach for an apple or a couple of clementine oranges, even sometimes like bananas and nuts. I've realized that nuts don't really do so great with my body, so I kind of have to be careful about that. But if that works for your body, you can, eat something like that, some nuts and some fruit. Or one of my favorite snacks that he suggests is apples, dates, and celery. That's a really good one. And it kind of covers the sugar, potassium, and sodium that you need. And so it just creates this really holistic, balanced snack. And then for dinner, I will usually just cook up some vegetables, whether I steam them or roast them, just like some baked potato with maybe some Brussels sprouts, or sweet potato over some steamed kale, something like that. Yeah. So, and then I'll always end my day. I try to end with some herbal tea and then a lime water. And lime water is going to kind of start the process for the liver to start kind of cleaning up.
Oh, that's cool. I do lemon water in the mornings, but I've never thought to have like a lime water at night. That's a really good idea, though. I love that.
Yeah. And, I actually never used to drink water. So that was a really hard one for me. So last year I had decided that was going to be my goal, was to get just 2 glasses of water, which would be so much more than my nothing that I was doing. And
obviously you were consuming like water through other stuff though.
Yes, right? That is true. Yeah. Through
okay.
vegetables and fruits. But I really, one of the things he talks about is just how dehydrated we all are. And so I know that that's an area that I also need to work on. And so I really just wanted to also, help care for my body and give it that extra hydration that it needs. So I kind of put bookend, because I was like, I was never good at drinking like water throughout the day. I know tons of people reach for water, but I never would. Coffee, yeah, but that's going to dehydrate you. So I really wanted to start doing that, especially when you drink alcohol or drink coffee. Then it's really important that you're drinking that water. And yeah, so I have been drinking more water, which is great. Yeah, it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm going to start doing lime water at night before bed. I usually do usually a herbal tea, like usually peppermint. I really like kind of after dinner, or whatever herbal tea we have around. We have like a chai rooibos right now, which is really yummy. But yeah, I don't do like lemon or lime water in the night. So I love that idea.
Yeah, good. Glad to share ideas.
Yeah, definitely. That's amazing. And so I'm curious, if somebody is interested in learning more about the medical medium, just from like your experience with educating yourself on this, where do you feel like is a good place to kind of start, if maybe you've heard about like the celery juice trend, but you don't really know anything more than that?
Yeah. So I think obviously each person's going to be different. And I think it's always a good place to start if you have something that you're trying to heal. And maybe not everybody has something like that, but I think most of us do have something that we're struggling with, whether it's like the acid reflux or the nausea or the acne or a mystery illness, fibromyalgia, something like that. He has a lot of books now. His sixth is about to come out, I think in February.
Wow.
And, yeah. And they're just packed with information. And if you sort of even just Google medical medium, Anthony William, and then type in your ailment, your disease, illness, whatever it is, that's a really good place to start because he has information regarding most ailments and illnesses. And it can kind of set you on that right path, or just even thinking about what's the easiest. So for me, taking supplements was not an easy thing. I've never really been good at taking pills or anything like that throughout the day. So I didn't really start there. I've worked my way up to including those things or incorporating those things. But I definitely didn't start there because that's not something that comes naturally to me. So you can start with just saying like, what's the easiest thing for me to add? Or if you feel like, well, it's kind of hard to add something, then take away something. So if you think adding the apple a day is easy, then just add that. That's a great start. Or buy a bag of lettuce and make it your goal to eat it that week. Or the celery sticks, on your drive to work. But if you feel like I can't really add anything, then you can try taking something away. You can try taking dairy out of your diet and see how you feel. Or try taking processed foods or gluten out of your diet and just kind of playing around with what works for you, really. Yeah. So I think where people start it's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those tips too. Like if you don't have space to feel like you can add, start with taking something out. Because I feel like too with health, like it's remembering that, at least for me, like my kind of philosophy is like everything I do now is like the long game. Like it's not about, definitely like it's great to see like, hey, next week I feel less tired than I do this week. But I also think it's like remembering that healing takes time and that it's going to take time to, add stuff in, change stuff up, change habits, build new ones and all that stuff. And so much of my health philosophy is about like being alive and well when I'm like 80 years old.
Yeah, definitely. And whether however long we all live, do you want to be able to be moving around and functioning and feeling well at that stage of your life? If we all make it to 80, some of us are not going to be feeling our best health. And it's like, don't you at least want to be feeling good if you're going to be alive? Like,
yeah, absolutely. That's definitely how I feel. So hopefully other people who are listening to this podcast are on the same wavelength with that.
Yeah, definitely. I know I am. So
yeah, for sure. Which is, why we get to have this conversation. And have there been any other resources? I know we've like heavily talked about Medical Medium and Anthony William today, but have there been any other resources or books or anything else like that that's been really helpful for you along your health journey, healing your body, healing your acne, and just like feeling better?
I really think that the Medical Medium has the best tools for healing illnesses. Right before I started down his path, I had read a book called Radiant Skin, and it was sort of almost like a textbook about dermatology. So I was that determined to try to fix it. And I read that. I spent tons of time reading and studying and trying to understand the body. And then I implemented his protocols and they didn't really work. And so for healing, I really believe that the Medical Medium does have the answers for that stuff. But there's tons of places to start. There's just so much information out there nowadays, going on YouTube to find recipes or Instagram, things like that. Those are great resources just in general. One company that I do love is Hay House Publishing Company. and they produce so many amazing people. And that's just for overall wellness and being, spirituality, and all that kind of thing. People like Bruce Lipton, Wayne Dyer, Anita Moorjani, Christiane Northrup. Another one is, I recently read Woman Code, which I know you've heard of, Alyssa Vitti. So yeah. She has some great information too. I love her philosophy of following the cycles for women, and that her exercise routines and things like that. So there's tons of great information out there.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing those. Cause there's so many great resources, which is amazing. But then on the other hand, it's like, I think sometimes we just need a starting point, like somewhere to kind of jump off of, because you could just spend so long trying to decipher like what's going to be right for you. And at the end of the day, we all have to try things, right? Like you said, you tried that one protocol. It didn't help with your skin. This one's been really great. And I think we just have to like figure out kind of, what makes us feel good. But those are all great resources. So I'll make sure that there's links to all of that stuff in the show notes. And yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This conversation's been so fun, Michelle. It's been awesome to be able to like officially, talk about this in a more like on this topic way. Because whenever we go for coffee, we talk about a million different things, which is also great. And so my final question for you is, where can people go to find you if they want to learn more about you?
So I am on Instagram at Michelle Coleman. And then I'm also on Michelle Swati on YouTube. So those are the two places that they can find me.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today, Michelle. This has been so fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Amanda.
All right, friends, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Matcha Mornings. And just quick before I let you go, I just wanted to give a little update on the medical medium protocol and how it's been a part of my life. So I mentioned at the beginning that I learned about it through Michelle, and then there was a point where I bought a juicer and I was doing the celery juice almost every day. For those of you who know me, you know that I spend a lot of the year traveling, and a juicer is not a small thing that fits in your carry-on bag or even your checked luggage for that matter. And so I actually stopped doing the celery juice probably over the last, let's say 9 months to a year. I haven't been doing it as regularly. However, something that's been a part of my life for the last couple of years, and even before I knew about the medical medium, is the lemon juice. That's something that I do every single morning, is warm lemon juice. And then I actually got Anthony Williams' book, Life-Changing Foods, which Michelle talked about as being her introduction to the medical medium. And it's been really amazing because I've discovered a lot of foods that I don't always eat that are really great for hormone balancing, which is one of the key ailments that I have in my life. And I added kiwis, apples, and potatoes into my diet in a way bigger way. For me, kiwis was something that I hadn't eaten probably since I was living at home or, was a teenager. Potatoes weren't something that my husband and I ate a lot of. And, apples I just ate from time to time. Well, over the last 6 months, I've been eating those a lot more. And I've really noticed a difference in how I'm feeling. So if you have something going on with your health or something that just doesn't feel 100%, I would definitely recommend getting Life-Changing Foods. Check out the different symptoms that you might be having, see what foods you could add in. I really firmly believe in everything that Michelle was talking about and everything that Anthony William puts out there around food being medicine. Food can be poison and food can also be medicine. So I hope that this is helpful. I hope that you enjoy this, and hopefully I will see you next time. Okay, bye for now. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Matcha Mornings. To find links mentioned in this episode, show notes, photos, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com/podcast/matcha-mornings. To be the first to know about brand new episodes of Matcha Mornings, subscribe on your podcast app. If you enjoyed this episode of the show, please leave a review or send me an email at wanderbarn@gmail.com with the subject line Matcha Mornings. To follow along with me, Amanda Kingsmith, you can find me on Instagram at Amanda Kingsmith to learn more about other fun projects I'm working on. To find more great podcasts like this one on topics such as travel, the business of yoga, cryptocurrency, and more, head on over to wanderbarn.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon.